I want you to picture a scenario. It is 3 a.m. on a rainy Tuesday.
Okay.
You are a firefighter. You are asleep in the station, but you are only half asleep because you know that alarm could go off at literally any second.
Right, you're always on edge in that job.
Exactly.
Ugh.
And then it does. And it is the bad alarm.
The one you don't want to hear.
Yeah, the one that signals a high-speed collision on the A16 highway. We are talking twisted metal, smoke, a driver trapped inside a completely crushed chassis.
A real worst-case scenario.
Completely. So you slide down the pole, your heart is already hammering against your ribs, you jump onto the truck, and you get to the scene. You see the wreck. You know exactly what you need to do.
Because you've trained for this 1,000 times.
Right. You turn around to grab the one specific tool designed to tear that car apart and save that person's life.
It's gone.
It is entirely gone.
Which is just the ultimate nightmare scenario for a first responder.
It really is.
I mean, you have the training, you have the willpower, but the actual physical mechanism to save the life is missing.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, based on the stack of reports we are going to be diving into today, this isn't just a hypothetical horror story to get your attention.
No, it's not.
In the Netherlands right now, this is actually becoming a reality.
It sounds like the opening scene of some dystopian thriller movie, doesn't it? Like society is just crumbling at the edges.
It really does.
But this is actually exactly where we have to start today. Welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a bizarre, alarming, and frankly infuriating trend where fire stations...
places that most of us consider sacred.
Yeah, or at least off limits to standard criminal greed. They are being broken into.
Right.
And the thieves aren't looking for the petty cash box or the office laptop or anything like that. They are stealing the jaws of life.
Which is a very specific and a very troubling indicator of where things are heading.
Very much so.
It suggests a major shift in the criminal landscape. We aren't just looking at, typical drug deals in dark alleys anymore.
Right.
We are looking at an entire infrastructure of organized crime that is actively cannibalizing the infrastructure of public safety.
Exactly. And that is the central theme of what we are unpacking in our deep dive today. We are looking at what is essentially an endless, high-stakes game of whack-a-mole between Dutch law enforcement and organized crime.
It really is a game of whack-a-mole.
You smash them down in the Rotterdam harbor and they just pop up in a fruit company in some sleepy provincial town.
Yep.
Or you lock them up in a high-security prison and suddenly they are ordering sushi and running the entire cell block like a private resort.
It is ultimately a story about adaptation versus rigidity.
Can you say more about that?
Well, the criminal underworld is fluid, right? It flows like water around any obstacles you put in its way. But the state, by its very definition, is bureaucratic. It's rigid.
Right. It has rules it has to follow.
Exactly. And today we are drawing on a really extensive discussion involving seasoned crime reporters and experts, specifically looking at the recent reporting and analysis from John Van Engevel and Gerda Frankenhuis.
Two people who really know this world inside and out.
Absolutely. And we're using their insights to map out exactly how this dynamic between the fluid criminals and the rigid state is playing out right now.
So our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this entire ecosystem for you. We want to understand how these criminal organizations are pivoting their logistics, how the legal system is struggling, and I mean really struggling to keep up with high-profile kingpins.
It's failing in some pretty spectacular ways.
It is. And we'll also get into the shocking reality of how some genuinely dangerous prisoners are living like royalty while they are supposedly incarcerated.
There is a lot to get through today, and I have to warn you, some of this is going to sound almost unbelievable.
It really is. So let's just jump right in and start with those fire stations. Because when I first read this in the source material, I literally had to double-check it.
It feels completely counterintuitive at first glance.
Right. Why on earth would you steal hydraulic shears from a fire station?
Well, to understand the why, you have to understand the what.
Okay, let's break down the what.
We often call them the jaws of life, which is a very catchy name, but technically we are talking about high-powered hydraulic spreaders and cutters.
So we aren't just talking about a big pair of scissors here.
No, not at all. These tools are absolute engineering marvels. They are designed to generate thousands of pounds of force per square inch.
Wow.
They operate at pressures of roughly 700 bar.
700 bar. That is a massive amount of pressure.
It is, and their sole purpose is to cut through the reinforced boron steel frames of modern vehicles.
Like the really heavy-duty structural parts of a car.
Exactly. The B-pillars, the hinges, the high-strength alloys that car manufacturers design specifically to not break during a massive crash.
So if it can cut through a car that is meant to survive a crash at 100 kilometers an hour,
It can cut through almost anything else you put in front of it.
such as.
Reinforced doors, heavy security shutters, and specifically the heavy metal casing of ATMs.
Ah, okay. So this links directly back to the plof crack phenomenon, the explosive attacks on ATMs that have been happening so frequently.
Exactly. But it is not just about the capability of the tool, it is also about the supply of the tool.
What do you mean by the supply?
These tools are incredibly expensive. We are talking roughly 25,000 euros per unit.
Wait, 25,000 euros for one single tool?
Yes, for one cutter.
That is insane.
And here is the real kicker, which is the thing that really drives the theft in the first place. There is a massive supply chain issue globally
Why is there a supply chain issue for firefighter gear?
because there are apparently only two main manufacturers in all of Europe that make this specific grade of heavy rescue equipment.
Only two. That seems incredibly limited for an entire continent.
It is a very niche market. You don't mass produce these things on an assembly line like iPhones.
Right.
So you can't just hop on a website, add it to your cart, and have it delivered the next day by a courier.
There's a backlog.
A massive waiting list. It is highly specialized gear made for specialized personnel.
So if you are a criminal enterprise, let's say you're a gang specializing in ATM raids,
Right.
and you need one of these tools right now to pull off a job this weekend. You literally cannot buy it legitimately, even if you wanted to spend the 25 grand.
Correct. You have a massive procurement problem.
And criminals are nothing if not problem solvers.
Exactly. If they can't buy it, they steal it. It's the path of least resistance.
But why do they need them right now? Why not just use a crowbar or something?
Speed. The Plofkrak gangs operate on a timeline of seconds.
Because the police are on the way the second the alarm goes off.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
they blow the front off an ATM with explosives, but often the internal cash cassettes are still stuck, or the wreckage of the machine prevents them from reaching the money.
The explosion mangles the machine instead of just opening it neatly.
Right. So these hydraulic tools can pry open that twisted wreckage or pop the safe door in seconds, whereas a crowbar would take 20 minutes of exhausting labor.
Which they don't have. So they are stealing the literal tools of salvation to use them as tools of destruction.
Precisely. And the scale of this is what is really worrying the authorities right now.
Because it's not just an isolated incident.
No. It started as a regional issue, mostly clustered around the Rotterdam-Rijnmond area, but the reporting shows it has spread significantly.
Where else is it happening?
It is happening in Friesland, it is happening in Limburg, it is fast becoming a nationwide phenomenon.
Which strongly suggests this isn't just one guy with a crowbar and a bad idea breaking into his local station.
No, absolutely not. The police strongly suspect this is the work of organized gangs.
Coordinating the thefts.
Yes, because these tools are so valuable, there is likely a secondary black market developing for them.
Like they are fencing jaws of life.
They could be reselling them, or what is even more likely, they are renting them out to other criminal groups for a cut of the profits.
Think of it like crime as a service.
That is a perfect way to describe it. Crime as a service.
Now that brings up a really fascinating detail from the sources regarding the tracking.
Yes, the tracking data.
Because these tools are so incredibly expensive, the fire departments don't just leave them lying around unmarked, right? They tag them.
Correct. We live in the age of the Internet of Things.
Right.
Many of these modern hydraulic units actually have GPS trackers, or RFID tags, built into them for inventory management and maintenance logging.
And that tracking data is revealing the true international nature of this crime wave.
It is blowing the doors off the investigation. Tools that were stolen from the Rotterdam region were actually traced by their digital signatures to locations in Switzerland, Austria, and Germany.
So let me get this straight. A fire station in Rotterdam gets robbed on a Tuesday, and weeks later, an ATM blows up in Zurich using that exact same tool.
That is exactly the pattern they are seeing. The tools are being physically moved across international borders to commit crimes elsewhere.
Which makes investigating it A complete jurisdictional nightmare for the police.
A total nightmare. But this brings me back to a very practical question that you might be wondering.
Okay, what's that?
A fighter station isn't a bank vault. It is a government building, usually with people inside 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Right.
So why is it so easy to steal these things? Why don't the fire departments just lock the tools in a heavy safe overnight?
Oh, because that puts the fire departments in an impossible operational dilemma.
Exactly. Think about how a fire station actually has to work to save lives.
Speed is everything.
Speed is everything. When that alarm goes off, you have minutes, sometimes literally seconds to get out the door.
Right, you can't be fumbling with keys.
The gear has to be on the truck, it has to be mounted, the batteries have to be charged, and it has to be ready to grab instantly.
You cannot lock the jaws of life in a heavy combination safe in the basement and say, hold on, guys, let me just find the combination code while the truck is idling and a family is trapped in a burning car.
You just can't. Securing them to the level that would be needed to actually stop these professional, organized thieves would defeat the entire purpose of having them for rapid emergency response.
They must be accessible, period.
They must be. And that operational vulnerability is exactly what is being exploited by these gangs.
You know, there was a moment in the source material that really struck me as the absolute peak of dark irony in all of this.
You're talking about the getaway cars?
Yes, the getaway cars.
Oh, this is a profound point. It almost feels like a Hollywood scriptwriter wrote it, but it's real life.
Tell them about the cars.
These gangs, specifically the ones doing the ATM bombings, they are very well known for driving high-performance, incredibly fast vehicles.
The sources specifically mention Audi RS6s.
Yes. They are sometimes literally referred to as the Audi gangs.
Right.
Because they drive recklessly at extremely high speeds. We are talking 200, maybe 250 kilometers per hour.
Often at night with the headlights off.
Yes, often fleeing the police in high-speed pursuits on the highway.
And naturally, when you drive a car like that, under those conditions...
You crash. They crash a lot. And when you crash an Audi RS6 at 200 kilometers per hour and wrap it around a concrete pillar or a tree, the frame of that car crumples.
It folds like an accordion.
And you are trapped in a cage of twisted steel.
And who is the one who comes to get you out of that wreckage?
The fire department.
The fire department.
And the dark irony here is that the firefighters might arrive at the scene of this horrific crash involving the very people who robbed their station a week ago.
Right.
Only to find that the one specific hydraulic tool they need to cut that criminal out of the wreckage is missing.
Because that exact criminal stole it.
Because they stole it.
It is tragic and incredibly ironic all at once.
It is. And the fire department has even had to issue public statements about this.
What do they say?
They say, look, we are here to help people. That is our job. We don't judge who is in the car.
Right.
But they're being put in a position where their ability to do that job, to help people, is being actively compromised by the people who might actually need it the most in that life or death moment.
It really just highlights the completely parasitic nature of this whole thing.
It does.
It is not just a standard crime. It is a crime that actively eats away at the fundamental safety net of society.
Well said.
But, okay, I think we should pivot from the hardware side of things, the tools and the cars, to the software side.
Or rather, the human element of these organizations.
Exactly. We need to talk about the massive legal tightrope the Dutch authorities are currently walking.
We really do. Because if the fire station thefts show us how criminals exploit physical vulnerabilities, this next section perfectly illustrates how they exploit legal vulnerabilities.
And this centers around a couple of very heavy names in the Dutch underworld. We're talking about Richard R., who is known as Rico the Chilean.
And, of course, the infamous Ridouan Taghi.
Let's start with Rico the Chilean. I have to say, it sounds like a character name from a mob movie, but he is a very real, very significant player.
He is incredibly significant. He is widely considered a major player linked to the Ridouan Taghi organization.
What was his role exactly?
He was often handling the high-level logistics of the international drug trade, and more importantly, the violence that enforces that trade.
The liquidations.
Yes. The authorities hunted him globally for years.
And they finally caught him in South America.
Right. He was eventually arrested in Chile, which is where his family roots are.
Now, this is where it gets incredibly legally complicated, and I want to unpack this carefully for everyone listening, because it explains perfectly why some of these guys seem so untouchable and hard to pin down.
It's a maze of international law.
Right. So he was arrested in Chile,
Mm.
but getting him back to the Netherlands to face trial wasn't just a simple handover, was it?
Not at all. There was no standard pre-existing extradition treaty between the Netherlands and Chile that covered this perfectly.
So what did they do?
To get him back, a very specific, ad hoc, custom deal had to be made between the two countries. And in international law, when you make a specific one-off request like this, something called the specialty rule often applies.
Okay, what does the specialty rule mean in plain English? Give us an analogy.
Think of it like ordering from a very strict set menu at a restaurant.
Okay.
The Netherlands went to Chile and said, "We want to order Rico, but we are only ordering him for the appetizer and the main course," which in this case were the charges of money laundering and membership in a criminal organization.
Got it.
And Chile says, "Okay, we agree to send him to you, but you are only allowed to prosecute him for those two specific things. You cannot suddenly decide to charge him for dessert once he actually gets to your table."
That makes sense. You can't beat and switch another sovereign country.
Exactly. You have to honor the terms of the specific extradition.
So they get him back to the Netherlands. They put him on trial for the money laundering and the criminal organization stuff, and he gets a sentence.
Right. And he is currently sitting in a Dutch prison serving that exact sentence.
But the story doesn't end there.
No, because while he has been sitting in a Dutch prison serving his time, the police have been incredibly busy behind the scenes.
Cracking the phones.
Yes. They have been cracking those encrypted communication networks, the PGP messages we hear so much about in these deep dives.
And I assume, based on his reputation, they found something much worse than just money laundering on those phones.
Much, much worse. The new evidence they managed to pull from these decrypted chats links Rico directly to liquidations.
Assassinations.
Assassinations. We are talking about concrete evidence of him ordering murders.
Wow. But because of the deal with Chile?
Because of the specialty rule, they can't just slap new charges on him.
Right.
The specialty rule actively protects him from that. To charge him with these new, far more serious crimes, the Dutch prosecutors actually have to go all the way back to the Chilean Supreme Court.
And do what? Ask for a menu change.
Essentially, yes. They have to formally ask for permission to expand the scope of the original prosecution.
And while they are doing all this international paperwork, the clock is ticking.
That is the real drama here. It is a massive race against time. Rico is nearing the end of his current sentence for the money laundering charges.
Oh, wow.
Yes. If that sentence ends, and the Chilean Supreme Court hasn't officially said yes to the new prosecution yet,
Then what happens?
technically, under the law, the Netherlands has absolutely no legal basis to keep him in a prison cell.
He could just walk free.
Theoretically, yes. He could literally walk out the front door of the prison and disappear.
That has to be a terrifying prospect for the prosecution. I mean, you have a man sitting in a cell who you strongly believe is a key architect of gang violence. You literally have the evidence of it on his phone. But because of international bureaucracy, you might just have to open the door and let him go.
It is a prosecutor's worst nightmare. They are using every single legal tool they have, trying to find ways to keep him in pre-trial detention on the existing charges just to buy time, but it is a massive legal mess.
And to make matters even worse for the prosecution, the actual court proceedings, the trial itself, have been totally stalled by something completely different.
Yes, the lawyer strike.
This was the part in the sources about the cameras, right? And the AIT.
Yes, the Afdeling Intensive Toezicht, which translates to the Intensive Supervision Unit.
What is that exactly?
This is a highly specialized, super secure wing within the prison system, specifically designed for extremely high-risk prisoners like Rico.
All right.
And the lawyers who were representing these high-profile clients effectively went on a strike. They completely refused to enter the facility to speak with their clients.
Why? What was the issue that made them strike?
Surveillance. Specifically the cameras. There are cameras installed in the private meeting rooms where the lawyers are supposed to speak confidentially with their clients.
Now, obviously, if you are in a maximum security prison dealing with cartel bosses, you need cameras in the room to ensure basic safety.
Of course. You need to make sure the lawyer isn't being held hostage, and you need to make sure no weapons or drugs or contraband are being passed across the table.
So what was the problem with the cameras?
The problem was the quality of the cameras. The ones they installed were ultra-high definition.
Whoa. How high definition are we talking?
High enough that the lawyers argued the prison authorities could technically zoom in and clearly read the screens of their laptops.
Wow.
Or zoom in and read the handwritten notes on their legal paths.
That is invasive.
They even argued the cameras were good enough that the state could hire professional lip readers to decipher exactly what the lawyer and client were whispering to each other.
Which would completely and utterly violate the core principle of attorney-client privilege.
Exactly. It breaks the fundamental trust required for a legal defense. The lawyers essentially said, look, we cannot legally or ethically defend our clients if the prosecution is essentially peeking over our shoulders and reading our defense strategy in real time.
It's a massive constitutional issue.
A huge one.
So how did the authorities resolve it? Did they just agree to turn the cameras off?
No, they can't turn them off for security reasons. So they implemented a technical fix. They brought in blurring technology.
How does that work?
It's software connected to the camera feed. It automatically uses AI to identify faces, mouths, and laptop screens in the room, and it actively blurs them out in the live video feed.
So the guards can see the silhouettes and the hand movements to ensure safety, but they can't read lips or screams.
Right.
That sounds like a pretty reasonable compromise on paper.
Ideally, yes. But trust, once it is broken in a high-stakes environment like this, is incredibly hard to fix.
The lawyers didn't buy it.
They remained deeply skeptical for a very long time. They argued, well, how do we know this blur isn't just applied on our end, or applied after you've already recorded the crystal clear raw footage?
Right. How do we know there isn't a backdoor feed going straight to the prosecutor?
Exactly. So it caused weeks and weeks of procedural delays.
And going back to what we just talked about, every single week of delay is 1 week closer to Rico's release date ticking down.
Correct. It all adds up in the worst way possible. The lawyers refusing to enter the room meant the cases literally could not proceed.
And right in the middle of all this legal chaos, we had a really bizarre cameo appearance from Rudon himself.
Yes, he actually appeared via video link in Rico's ongoing case.
Tell us about that, because the sources paint a very strange picture of this moment.
It was strange. He was called as a witness. Now remember, Taghi is currently locked up in the EB, the extra high-security prison in Vote.
The most secure place in the country.
Right. So he appeared on a large video screen inside the courtroom. And literally the very first thing he did when the microphone turned on was complain.
Complained about what?
The high-def cameras again? No, he complained to the judge that he had not been given the opportunity to consult with his lawyer prior to this court appearance.
Wait, but does he actually even have a lawyer right now? Because I feel like I read recently that he was representing himself.
And that right there is the pure absurdity of it. At that specific moment in time, he did not have a lawyer.
He didn't have one.
No. He has gone through several different legal teams over the years. Some have resigned out of fear. Some have actually been arrested for passing messages for him. It is a completely chaotic situation.
But he still used the platform to complain about it.
Yes, he used his moment in front of the judge to say, I cannot possibly speak today because I haven't spoken to my legal counsel, despite perfectly well knowing he didn't have one to speak to.
It just feels like blatant stalling tactics, making a mockery of the process.
It certainly comes across that way to observers. It is pure courtroom theater.
And what happened when they actually forced him to answer questions about the substance of the case? About his connection to Rico?
He flatly denied all of it. He sat there and said he had absolutely no communication with Rico whatsoever.
Despite the police sitting on a mountain of decrypted PGP messages that strongly suggest otherwise.
Right. The prosecution firmly believes they have undeniable written proof of contact between the two of them regarding liquidations and massive money laundering operations.
But Taghi just says, nope, never spoke to the guy.
Nope, don't know him. It perfectly highlights how incredibly difficult these mega trials really are.
You have uncooperative witnesses,
You have international legal hurdles like the extradition treaties.
technical disputes over surveillance.
It is honestly a miracle any of these massive cases move forward at all with so many moving parts.
It really paints a vivid picture of a justice system that was designed for a completely different era, trying desperately to cope with a modern, digital, borderless criminal enterprise.
That is a very apt way to put it. The legal system is rigid and the crime is fluid. The criminals just exploit the tiny gaps between the rules.
Speaking of fluid, let's pivot and talk about the logistics of smuggling.
Yeah.
Because if the fire station thefts we talked about at the top are the smash and grab, blue-collar end of the spectrum.
The smuggling operations are the high-level corporate strategy end.
Absolutely. This is where we see the real, almost frightening innovation. We need to talk about ghost companies.
Yes, ghost companies. It sounds very spooky, but it's basically corporate camouflage.
What exactly are we dealing with here? In the Dutch reporting, it is known as the deckmantel strategy, using a cover.
Okay.
As physical security in the main ports gets tighter and tighter, more fences, more cameras, the smugglers are switching tactics. They are using administrative loopholes to hide in plain sight.
So instead of trying to throw a duffel bag of cocaine over a barbed wire fence at midnight, they are just pretending to be legitimate businessmen.
Exactly. Anyone can go to the Chamber of Commerce and register a new company. It is remarkably easy and requires very little initial verification.
So the criminals register a company, let's say an agricultural import business.
Usually a fruit import business.
Why is it always fruit? I feel like whenever there is a massive bust, it is always hidden in bananas or pineapples. Why fruit?
It is actually a brilliant logistical choice for smuggling because fruit moves fast.
Oh, because it rots.
Exactly. It is highly perishable. Customs agents cannot legally let a shipping container full of fresh bananas sit on the dock for 3 weeks while they do a slow, deep dive inspection.
Right, the bananas would turn to mush, the cargo would be ruined, and the state could be liable for millions in damages to a supposedly legitimate business.
Precisely. So the entire logistics chain at the port is heavily prioritized for speed when it comes to perishables. Smugglers absolutely love that manufactured urgency.
Because it puts immense pressure on the customs officers to just stamp the paperwork and release the container quickly.
You got it.
So they set up this completely fake fruit company. What happens next? How do they get caught if the paperwork looks real?
Well, on paper, it does look real, but the police have had to adapt. They have started to set up special task forces solely to look for anomalies in the business registry.
They are hunting for red flags.
Yes, hunting for red flags in the corporate paperwork.
Give me a concrete example of a red flag that these task forces look for.
Well, one hilarious but very real example mentioned in the sources is a car dealership.
A car dealership smuggling drugs.
Operating as a front, yes. The police looked at the commercial registration and realized the physical business address for this supposed luxury car dealership was located on the second floor of a standard office building,
A car dealership on the second floor.
with absolutely no freight elevator for cars.
That is a pretty massive red flag. Come see our new models. Just carry them up the stairs.
Right. It shows that sometimes they get sloppy or lazy with the details.
What are some other examples?
They find beauty salons that are fully equipped with expensive styling chairs and imported hair products, but they never seem to have a single actual customer walk through the door.
Or businesses that claim to be importing millions of euros worth of goods every month, but haven't actually filed a tax return in 2 years.
It is very much the Ozark style of money laundering and fronting.
It is. But cracking that has to require incredibly labor-intensive police work.
It is exhausting work. You cannot just look at a spreadsheet and arrest someone.
Right.
Sometimes, undercover detectives physically have to sit in an unmarked car across the street and watch a storefront for days on end.
Just logging every person who walks in.
Yes. Okay. It is Tuesday at 10 a.m. Is anyone actually buying a car? Is anyone actually getting a haircut in there?
That sounds incredibly expensive for the police departments to maintain.
It is heavily resource intensive, and the frustrating part is, while the police are spending weeks watching a fake beauty salon, the smugglers are already shifting their geography entirely.
Which brings us to a concept I absolutely love from the reporting. The waterbed effect.
It's the perfect analogy for this problem.
You push down hard on one part of the waterbed, and the water just bulges up somewhere else.
Exactly. For years, Rotterdam has been the primary battleground. The mayor of Rotterdam, Ahmed Aboutaleb, and the port authorities have invested absolute millions in hardening the security there.
They basically turned it into a fortress.
Smart fences, biometric access controls for all the dock workers, massive drone surveillance programs, and heavily reducing access to the internal computer system so corrupt insiders can't easily track where the containers are sitting.
And if you look at the raw stats, it seems like it's working, right? The seizures in Rotterdam dropped.
They dropped significantly. They went from around 25,000 kilos of cocaine seized in a previous year all the way down to about 11,500 kilos last year.
Which sounds like a massive victory for law enforcement.
It looks like a huge victory on a graph in a boardroom. But then you look at January of this current year.
What happened in January?
In that single month alone, they seized 8,000 kilos.
Wait, what? So in one single month, they seized almost as much as they did in the entire previous 12 months combined.
Yes. Which leads experts to suggest two possible realities. Either the police got incredibly lucky with one or two megabusts that skewed the data, or the flow of drugs never actually stopped at all, it just went deeper underground, or it moved somewhere else temporarily and is now flooding back.
Where is it moving to? The bulge in the waterbed.
Smaller ports. Vlissingen is mentioned specifically in the reports.
Why Vlissingen?
Because Vlissingen happens to be a major port for fresh fruit imports.
Back to the bananas.
Exactly, the perishability factor. If Rotterdam becomes too hard to penetrate, Vlissingen becomes the open back door.
Or they just leave the country entirely.
Right, they move their operations to massive foreign ports nearby, like Antwerp in Belgium, Hamburg in Germany, or Le Havre in France.
So by spending millions securing Rotterdam, we might just be successfully outsourcing our crime problem to Zealand or to Germany.
That is the harsh reality of the waterbed effect. The actual consumer demand for cocaine in Europe remains entirely constant, so the supply chain just intelligently reroutes itself around the blockades.
And it is not just the locations that are evolving. The physical smuggling methods are getting incredibly high-tech.
Beyond high-tech.
We aren't just talking about hiding bricks of drugs inside hollowed-out pineapples anymore. We're talking about magnets.
The magnet method is a rapidly rising trend.
Explain how this works.
Professional divers attach highly waterproofed, sealed packages of cocaine directly to the exterior hull of the massive cargo ships, way below the waterline, using incredibly strong industrial magnets.
That sounds like something straight out of James Bond movie.
It really does.
Yeah.
But it is highly effective because it completely bypasses all the internal port checks.
Because the drugs never actually enter the port infrastructure.
Exactly. If the drugs are on the outside of the ship, underneath the water, you do not need to bribe a corrupt customs officer to look the other way when a container is open.
You don't need a fake fruit company.
Right. You just need a skilled diver on a Zodiac boat to swim out in the dark and unhook the magnets before the massive ship even docks, or while it is just sitting out at anchor waiting for a berth.
That implies a seriously high level of physical capability. I mean, diving in the freezing, choppy water of a busy commercial port in the middle of the night near massive ship propellers is not easy.
It is incredibly dangerous and it requires military-grade professional gear, but the financial payoff is so huge that they find people willing to do it.
And the sources also talked about floating ports. What are those?
This is a fascinating leap in logistics. Instead of bringing the drugs into the port at all, these massive cargo ships will offload the drugs onto smaller boats or even temporary floating platforms out at sea in international waters.
So the big container ship that eventually sails into Rotterdam and gets inspected by customs is totally clean.
Spotless. Because the drugs were offloaded 50 miles offshore in the dead of night, transferred onto a fast speedboat or an old fishing trawler, and that smaller boat lands at a tiny, unmonitored tourist marina somewhere totally unexpected.
Wow. And the craziest detail to me was the deep-sea vehicles. Are we literally talking about drug cartels using submarines in Europe?
Technically, they are called semi-submersibles.
What's the difference?
They don't dive entirely deep like a military sub. They are low-profile vessels, often made of fiberglass, so they don't reflect radar well, and they sit just an inch or two below the surface of the water.
So you can't see them from a patrol boat.
Often, the only thing sticking out above the waves is a tiny pipe for engine air intake and exhaust. They are practically invisible to standard coastal radar and visual patrols.
And what did you use them for?
They can travel all the way across the ocean from South America, or more commonly now, they are used for that crucial last leg of the journey, bringing the drugs from a mothership out at sea directly to the shore unseen.
The level of financial investment required to build a fiberglass semi-submersible in a jungle somewhere, that is not amateur hour.
No, this represents a massive global industrial operation. These are cartels with actual research and development departments.
And despite all of this, despite the millions spent on drones in Rotterdam, the task forces busting the ghost companies, the police boats hunting for magnets in the dark, the single most damning statistic in this entire deep dive is the price.
Yes, the street price of cocaine.
Basic economics tells us how this should work.
Right. If supply is heavily restricted because the police are successfully seizing tens of thousands of kilos at the ports, the price on the street should logically go up.
Scarcity drives value. That is Economics 101.
But the reality is the exact opposite. The wholesale price of a kilo of cocaine in Europe has actually dropped to a historic low.
How low?
It is currently hovering around 13,000 euros per kilo wholesale.
It is getting cheaper.
It is getting significantly cheaper. because the global market is absolutely flooded.
Where's it all coming from?
There is massive, unchecked overproduction happening right now in South America. The cartels are producing so much product and pushing it so aggressively toward Europe that they are sometimes essentially giving it away to local gangs on credit.
Or selling it at dump prices just to move the massive volume sitting in their warehouses.
Exactly. So despite all the high-profile successes and mega busts by law enforcement, the streets are quite literally awash in cheap cocaine.
They are essentially overwhelming the state's defenses with sheer volume. You can't catch it all.
You can't. And interestingly, the demographic of the consumer is shifting too. The typical cocaine user in Europe is now aging. It's often people 30 and older.
Really? What are the younger kids doing?
The younger generation is shifting heavily towards synthetic designer drugs, like 3-MMC, which they can buy online and have delivered in the mail, which obviously presents a whole new set of complex problems for public health.
But the cocaine pipeline itself.
It is robust, it is incredibly cheap, and it is absolutely everywhere.
Okay, so we have fire stations being robbed of their tools, an international legal system tied in bureaucratic knots, and a global smuggling network that is vastly out-innovating the police at every turn.
It's a grim picture.
It is. But surely the average citizen thinks once we finally catch these guys, once we actually get these kingpins behind bars, convicted and locked away, that is the end of it, right?
I would certainly hope so.
Punishment is served, they are incapacitated, and society is safe.
But this brings us to perhaps the most infuriating and shocking part of our entire deep dive today: the king in the cell.
This section of the reporting really blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because we all assume prison is, well, it's prison.
Right.
Austerity, loss of freedom, concrete walls, and bad food.
And for your average run-of-the-mill inmate, it absolutely is. But for the big fish, the system is failing in a truly spectacular way.
We have to talk about the EB.
The extra-beveilighting, the supermax prison located in Vogt.
This is where they keep the absolute worst of the worst in the Netherlands. Hollander.
Correct. And the EB is generally very secure. Escapes are practically unheard of, but the facility has a major problem. It is completely full.
Well, it has a limited capacity.
Very limited.
Yeah.
And it creates a huge legal dilemma for the state. You cannot legally just throw someone in maximum extreme isolation forever without continuously justifying it to a judge.
Right. Human rights laws apply.
Exactly. If a major criminal has been sitting in complete isolation in the EB for 5 years, the legal argument eventually becomes that their actionable intelligence has dried up.
Because they haven't been able to speak to anyone on the outside.
Right. The lawyers go to court and argue, look, my client is no longer a current danger to society. He is completely out of the loop. He isn't running the gang anymore. It is cruel to keep him in Supermax. You must move him down to a normal, standard security prison.
And legally, that is a very strong argument to make.
It is. So you have these extremely high-risk, manipulative individuals potentially moving down the ladder to lower security facilities that are not equipped to handle them.
And that is exactly where things go horribly wrong.
Ugh.
Let's talk about the specific case of Lysander DR.
Yes. Lysander DR is the notorious leader of the Hardliners motorcycle gang.
The sources have a very specific way of describing his personality.
They describe him as crazy as a door, which is a very vivid Dutch expression that basically means utterly unhinged and deeply unpredictable.
And driven heavily by personal revenge.
Very much so. This is a man who has openly threatened mayors of towns. He has threatened crime journalists who wrote about him. He is a man who rules his empire entirely through intimidation and fear.
A genuinely dangerous man to cross.
Extremely. But, crucially, he wasn't locked up in the EB.
Where was he?
He was placed in standard security prisons. The facilities in Zwaag and Zaanstad are mentioned specifically in the reports.
And the description of his daily life inside those walls is, well, it doesn't sound like prison at all.
It sounds more like a strange, slightly low-budget boutique hotel where he was the manager.
Let's list some of these amenities he had, because people need to hear this. Let's start with his bed.
Well, he apparently complained to the prison staff that he had a bad back from the standard issue prison mattress.
Okay.
Because he demanded, and was actually given, a highly expensive custom orthopedic mattress for his cell.
In a state prison.
Yeah.
They use state funds to buy a gang leader a special mattress.
Yes, they did.
Unbelievable. What about the food?
He didn't care for the standard cafeteria food, so he regularly ordered fresh sushi dinners to be delivered to him.
Wait, sushi? How on earth do you get a sushi delivery brought into a secure prison?
Smuggling, obviously. but done so incredibly openly and brazenly that the prison staff absolutely had to have been complicit, or at the very least, completely terrified to stop it.
He also had alcohol, right?
Yes. He regularly had premium whiskey smuggled in, cleverly disguised in normal apple juice bottles.
How does a situation like that even develop? How does a single prisoner manage to dictate terms like that to the people who literally hold the keys to his cage?
Fear. Pure, unfiltered fear. The reporting describes a pervasive culture of total fear among the guards working on his block.
Give me an example of the power dynamic.
Well, Lysander liked to sleep in. He slept until 9:30 in the morning every day.
Okay, but prisons run on a strict schedule. Roll call, breakfast.
Not for him. The guards were explicitly forbidden by him, and seemingly by the quiet consensus of the floor, to wake him up for morning checks.
Shh, tiptoe around the cell. Don't wake the gang boss. That is insane.
It is entirely inverted. The prisoner is in charge.
But how did he get that leverage over them? Was he just physically intimidating?
It was worse than just physical threats in the moment. He apparently possessed a smuggled USB hard drive that contained highly sensitive private information about the actual prison guards.
What kind of information? Like their home addresses?
Home addresses, details about their spouses, the names and schools of their children.
Oh, wow. That changes the dynamic completely.
It entirely changes the game. He effectively held the entire civilian staff psychologically hostage.
Right. Treat me like a king, bring me my sushi, or I make a phone call and pay your family a visit.
Exactly. And the prison directors, the management who are supposed to be in charge of the facility, when faced with this explosive situation, they essentially chose appeasement.
They prioritized quiet on the cell block over enforcing the actual rule.
Yes. They effectively pampered the single most dangerous inmate they had just to keep him calm and avoid an incident on their watch.
But that is a terribly short-sighted, short-term solution with devastating long-term consequences.
Absolutely, because think about what message that sends. What does that say to the other 100 prisoners on that block? Or to the new guards coming in?
It clearly says that if you are violent enough and scary enough, the rules of the state simply do not apply to you.
Right. You are above the law, even while locked inside the law's building.
And the craziest part of all of this to me, despite all of these red flags, despite the documented threats, the extortion of the guards, the blatant power plays, the smuggled sushi, he is currently being reintegrated into society.
Yes. The Dutch penal system is fundamentally built around the concept of resocialization, phasing inmates back out into the world.
But what does that mean for him right now?
It means he is currently being granted weekend leave.
He literally gets to go home for the weekend.
Yes. He walks out the front gate of the prison on a Friday afternoon, hangs out with his associates, and comes back on Sunday evening.
And the experts we analyzed for this deep dive are heavily critical of this approach.
Deeply critical. They strongly argue that the Dutch system is fundamentally naive in cases like this.
Because it treats everyone exactly the same.
Right. It treats hardcore career criminals, people who literally run violent international empires, the exact same procedural way it treats a young guy who made a mistake and got into a bar fight.
One size fits all.
But one size clearly does not fit all. Releasing a man like Lysander de R back onto the streets, even just for a 48-hour weekend leave, is essentially releasing a walking time bomb into the public.
Because he hasn't reformed at all.
No, he has active grudges against journalists and politicians. He still controls a violent network. He has shown zero remorse, and yet the bureaucracy just blindly ticks the boxes on his chart and opens the front gate for him.
It is genuinely terrifying to think about. We have covered so much ground today. From the mechanical claws of the jaws of life being stolen from sleeping firefighters
to the high seas magnetism of international drug smuggling,
all the way to premium sushi dinners being served in a maximum security cell block.
It is a massive amount of information to process.
If we try to synthesize all of this source material into one cohesive thought, what is the ultimate connecting thread here?
I really think the main thread, as we mentioned at the start, is adaptation versus rigidity.
Right.
Organized crime is basically a living organism. It evolves rapidly. It always finds the path of least resistance.
The weak point.
Exactly. If you build a massive physical wall in Rotterdam, they just build a metaphorical tunnel in Vlissingen. If you build a digital wall, they use fake paper companies to walk right through the front door.
And if you lock them up, they just find a way to corrupt the people holding the keys.
Right. And the state. The state is a massive, slow-moving machine. It has to follow strict rules. It has to follow international treaties that take decades to write. It follows protocols.
And right now, the organism is simply moving 100 times faster than the machine.
It is. Whether it is stealing emergency rescue gear because the legitimate global supply chain is too slow for their needs, or exploiting an obscure Chilean extradition treaty loophole because the law wasn't written with modern cartel bosses in mind.
The criminals are just constantly out-innovating the very systems that were designed to stop them.
They are. And we really need to remember there is a tangible, severe human cost to all of this. It isn't just an abstract game of cops and robbers on a spreadsheet.
No, it is the real firefighter who shows up to a crash and cannot save a dying person because his tools are gone.
It is the honest dock worker in Rotterdam who lives in daily terror because a cartel threatened his children.
It is the youth in the inner cities getting sucked into this incredibly violent world because the massive wealth of the drug trade is being flaunted right in their faces on social media.
It's the total degradation of public trust in our basic institutions.
It totally reminds me of the waterbed effect analogy you mentioned earlier. It feels like society is stuck in this endless cycle where we squeeze down hard on one problem and two completely new ones just pop up to replace it.
And that is exactly the big provocative question I want to leave the listener with today.
Let's hear it.
We constantly hear politicians and the public call for harder enforcement. We need more police on the streets. We need bigger and stronger jails. We need higher fences.
That crack down on crime.
But
Yeah.
if Rotterdam becomes an impenetrable fortress, the crime just moves to destroy a smaller town like Vlissingen.
Right.
If the EB Supermax prison becomes too full, extremely high-risk prisoners are forced into lower security jails where they manipulate the guards and order sushi.
So the question
Is the current global strategy of simply hardening the targets actually working to stop crime? Or is it just blindly spreading the infection to completely new, much less equipped areas of our society?
are we actually curing the disease, or are we just aggressively chasing the symptoms around the body? That is an incredibly sobering thought to end on. It strongly suggests we might need a totally different foundational approach to this, though I'm not entirely sure anyone on Earth knows exactly what that looks like just yet.
It is going to require a level of international cooperation and systemic agility that governments historically really struggle to achieve.
But until they manage to find it, the hydraulic shears will keep mysteriously disappearing in the night.
And the sushi will just keep being delivered directly to cell block C.
On that note, next time you are walking past a shop on your local high street, maybe a brightly lit beauty salon that is always completely empty, or a luxury car dealership located bizarrely on the second floor of an office building.
Take a much closer look.
Yeah. You might just be seeing the very tip of a massive international iceberg.
Indeed, you might. Stay curious out there.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. If you found this as fascinating and slightly terrifying as I did, please keep exploring the topic. We'll be back next time with another massive stack of sources to unpack for you.
Until then, stay safe.